Hello viewers, I'm Ethan Fender, better known as the Slimed Artist, and welcome back to Exploring SAMSS. And as requested by a friend, I'll be going over the Janitor, formerly Soldier, and current the Slimed Artist crew member, Charles. I should note right away that the information we'll cover only goes up to his latest appearance, so keep in mind that I may return to Charles once more down the line to discuss updates and further information. With that said, I'll be going over serious lore that I'd rather be kept disclosed until I'm ready to tell, but screw it. His origin was supposed to be explored in Tales of SAMSS, where there were a story called The Secret of the Watchtower, which is a major event in Charles' life as we'll get into. I should also say that due to the lack of Charles footage and any references material I can use, you'll probably get background footage of games or SAMSS things not related to Charles at all. With that said, I suggest this to be something you listen to rather than watch, so take this time to play a game or even write your own characters. Final note, I won't be going over his origin just yet. Instead, I'm going to talk about Charles' role in SAMSS beforehand so you get a better idea of him, and then we can go over his tragic backstory. There's chapters for you to skip to at desired time, but I suggest you watch the whole thing. Or, again, listen to the whole thing. Charles, as we currently know him as, first appeared in Halloween Special 2022, where he was merely shown to be someone who, is annoying and had very few speaking lines. While he was initially made on the script for the video, his character has since been expanded on, leading him to make more and more appearances throughout the series, often seen with the Slimed Artist crew. Charles is now defined as a supporting character and will prove his role in Collection 1, aka Season 1's ending, and throughout Collection 2. He serves as the crew's janitor, taking up this occupation after the events of his story, as we'll get into shortly. Charles is now commonly paired up with Lewis, as the two make quite the bromance, wouldn't you agree? Plus, their colors just mix fairly well. What is up with me having duo characters with one being green and the other blue? Anyway, aside from his job, he's become close friends with the crew personally and even its honor members, such as Cameron, Dave, and Matt. While it's hard to say that he's the quote-unquote comic relief, since everyone else is kind of that role anyway, nonetheless, he does often add humor to his scene, some of which is seen due to several scripts not yet being made in the cinema, and overall just seem to be joyful and easily excited. Though, as we will see, there's a much deeper, darker, and sad side to his personality, which we will quickly reveal between seasons 1 and 2. The origin. To get Charles' origin, I must speak of Cosmos, the universe in which Charles and SAMSS primarily follows came to be. No worries, however, I won't be going over that much of it. Really just a summary of what the Crackverse is. There are several videos planned to explore lore more in depth and, dramatic. Let's begin with the story of Cosmos and Charles' mother. Cosmos, or known as the Crackverse, Verse 1, or Reality 3121, came to life when godlike beings sacrificed the universe to gain more power, creating the empty slate that would be named Cosmos much later. Due to the improper creation of this universe, it caused multiversal anomalies, pulling in elements from various other universes, which include structures, objects, wildlife, physics, and as you probably have guessed, people. One such woman would be pregnant before her sudden arrival to the new universe. This would be the mother of Charles, and as you may have guessed, she's pregnant with him. Seeking help for survival and care for both herself and the coming baby, she would find a city that was built around people who they too were from different universes. The city would be called the Lost Souls. Residents of the Lost Souls welcome her to their city, for she is just as lost as them. While meeting tens of people, she would find most trust and respect in the Lost Souls law enforcement, the Fury 15 member, Steve Myers, who we know today as Omega, but we'll get into him when we do. He has not yet made an appearance in SAMSS. Within a month, the weather, balance of nature, and mental states would be affected greatly. This would be nicknamed as the Great Collapse for the time being. However, it would be renamed the First Collapse much later down the timeline. Steve Myers would be one of many who had a personality change, and with it, conflicted with Charles' mother. However, despite the difficulty, they remained friends, and she still trusted him for the assistance in her care as well as the babies. However, by midwinter, the Great Collapse would enter a far worse state. Immense blizzards and an increase of delusion ran through the city. At this time, she had given birth to Charles, but sadly passed away in the process. Left to really be the only choice in trusted relationship, Steve Myers would take care of him. However, the once loved city of the Lost Souls would shatter, collapse, fall to the immense weather, and disorganized residents who live here. With a decision to move southward to the new city of Cold Steel, Steve Myers, and most notable, the newly formed Scholar Heroes in Time, a quasi-religious and research group that took care of the residents who survived the collapse of the Lost Souls. Steve Myers would quickly find them to be trustworthy and was even interested in learning more of their cause. There's a lot to cover with the story of the scholars, but I'll skip ahead when Charles is much older. In the year 7 of the Cosmonian chart, Charles, now nearly 7 years old, and along with other children, were to enter the Scholar Heroes in Time experimental program, Gauntlet, where Steve Myers, now going by as Omega, would train himself and even injected a recently created strength enhancement fluid known as Ebony Enhant. However, there seemed to be no visual changes to the kids, instead were all affected psychologically. Charles, who was mostly rude and rebellious, is now open-minded and kind, which was an obstacle in his training for war. As the years went by, the program, or more so the kids, would go by as Gauntlets, with all the members fairly taught for battle and other skills. While they in fact got close to each other, Charles was often out of off-duty socializing, leading him to primarily do things alone. Taking a liking to the chores, he would fall in love with the premise of cleaning, taking up as the base's quote-unquote janitor. Of course, when they were not training or running session. However, years of military training and missions of assassinating prominent members of Cosmo's community finally reached an end, where in the year 16, a mission seemingly impossible would end traumatically and deadly. In what was simply referred to as the Wildlife Operation, the Gauntlets were sent out to assassinate the politician Hayes, the first time ever without Omega aboard such a mission. However, whether he was part of it or not, events followed up became unavoidable. Hayes was not here on vacation in the cabin. No, in fact, unknown to the scholars, he was invited to a highly automated defense compound owned by a mysterious individual who would become more known down the timeline. Without prior knowledge, once closing into the compound, the automatic systems would activate and... This once moderately sized group of military-trained teenagers would be cut down to the remaining 5, of course including Charles. They would retreat and find safety in an abandoned fire watchtower. However, their failure and loss in numbers seemingly a sign of the group that it may be perceived to be shut down. Some realized it did not matter whether they went back or not. Death was inevitable. 2 attempted to finish their mission, gunned down and heard by their comrades in the tower a distance away. Silence met the remaining 3. Charles, too, broke. He didn't talk, wouldn't talk, couldn't. For a few days he remained in the tower, starving. The other 2 discussed an idea, one that felt like a last result, but would be one in their own control. Charles watched in horror and distraught as one took his own life with a handgun. The other knew Charles would not do it himself and took the initiation to kill him, but they couldn't. Charles simply sat and wept as they too met their end by their own hand. In the coming days, Charles left the tower for food and to leave what happened behind. In the following years, Charles had successfully hid from the Scholar Heroes in Time, adapting to the name we know him as, Charles. His need for quietness and to move past the dark time caused him to pick up on supplements of various kinds, stolen medicine, and even illegal drugs. Becoming a janitor, he moved from boss to boss, usually fired for his use of these substances, being annoying, and even once when there were growing scholar activity around him. Eventually, he would find himself working for directors of an art style known as machinima. Who or how many machinima content creators he worked for is not known or, been said. This would lead him to eventually visit a machinima convention, now as an unemployed man. Here, he went on to meet many machinaires. One such person, who he would later meet up with again, Ethan the Slimed Artist. Jumping to later that day, they would meet up once more, and by the end of the convention, where after discussing further, Ethan would learn of his janitorial skill sets and the need of a cleaner, he proposes a pricing and Charles is up for it. A few days later, Charles arrives at his new job at the Slimer's crew base, meeting his boss and Jason the assistant. We're going to kind of enter a speedrun kind of thing. This bit of the timeline is still under organizing, so I'll jump from major points of his story in which Charles is a part of. Later that year, Lewis would join the crew, the two having a sort of bromance kind of thing. Not saying, of course, that they'll be a couple, simply putting it out there. They have a back and forth sort of thing. The crew and Charles actually get to know each other fairly well. While yes, employees, they've actually become close friends, along with other friends of Ethan. It came to a point where when Charles was found out about his use of substances that he tried to leave, assuming he would be kicked out like the rest. However, Ethan and Lewis were able to stop him before and approached him about it, revealing that they did not mind at all as long as he didn't try to sell or trick them to take any of it. Charles agreed and became happy once more in a long time, finding peeps who he can hang out with. Skipping a lot of time, we'll get to the events in the mid-collection one with the drive-thru, which you see Charles saying bye to Ethan and Lewis heading out for some muffins, and says he will be there to guard the base until they return, and doubts any weirdos will come over. Unknown to him, a few minutes later, right. What I'm about to explain next spoils episode 8, titled as Exposition, which we might not see until later 2025 or sometime in 2026. God, I hope not. However, I'm going through a scene we'll see in that episode anyway, so, here's a spoiler. As he was cleaning the base, he was met by who he initially thought was Ethan by his voice, but was actually who he will get to know as Evilness much later, along with Player. After a misunderstanding, the two strangers left, with Charles unsure about the Evilness fella. However, sometime after, Ethan and Lewis returned. Strange things began to happen here at the Slime Darters crew base. Everyone, including Charles, would tell that they'd see visions, both from their past and even claiming to see intruders, just to see no one was there at all. These sights will be explained in another video, but they actually prove to be quite the basis for the plot within the future. Sadly, however, at this time there isn't much more we can cover without spoiling too much for SAMSS. What we know for the rest of Charles is that he, under the pressures of the visions and his past, becomes slightly more serious, and the use of drug substances much less, as well as picking back up his military training, which will be very important for Attacker's cultists. Yeah, with that said, we reach an end to what we will cover today for Charles, the janitorial soldier. He may be a supporting character, but I've recently fallen in love with him and with his role in Origin, tying down the universe and the threats of the Scholar Heroes in time, as he's pretty related to them. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I apologize for the wait. You gotta remember, I also have like 3 other channels and difficulties in life at the moment, but we all do. If you made it through and liked what we covered, please comment below what you want to know more of, or who you want to know more of, or maybe, see other subjects. I do have a, question mark how many facts about SAMSS video in the works, but who knows when that will be out, as it is a trivia video covering tons of facts, lore, and behind the scenes. Anyway, check out my other content, and goodbye.